Szanowni Państwo, drugim naszym prelegentem w dniu dzisiejszym, w tym tej pierwszej globalnej części naszej refleksji nad nad katolicką nauką społeczną, będzie pan profesor Nikita Harwich z Uniwersytetu Paryskiego. Temat wystąpienia pana profesora to tożsamość europejska w obliczu wyzwań procesu rozszerzania i integracji Unii Europejskiej, spojrzenie z zewnątrz. Pan profesor zajmuje się historią gospodarczą, głównie Ameryki Łacińskiej, historią inwestycji zagranicznych w Wenezueli, również w Stanach Zjednoczonych. Pracował także nad zagadnieniem handlu towarami oraz, co ciekawe, nad historią czekolady, na temat której napisał książkę, której poświęcił jedną ze swoich książek. Obecnie pracuje nad historią państwa w Ameryce w drugiej połowie XIX wieku. Powitajmy serdecznie pana profesora Nikitę Harwicha. Professor, the floor is yours.
Your Eminence, Your Excellencies, my Lord Archbishop, dear colleagues, friends, I would like to thank you for the kind invitation to this meeting, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the restitution of Poland as an independent nation state. I would like to insist that my short presentation today is really an outsider's view. Outsider in the sense that my subject of academic research really has more to do with America than with Europe, but at the same time, this whole question of American or Latin American identity has a common grounding with the questions being asked today about European identity. And it is important to understand the significance and consequences of these national identities. About 20 years ago, French historian Anne-Marie Thiès published a controversial book on the creation of national identities in Europe. In it, she wrote, "Nothing, I'm quoting, nothing could be more international than the formation of national identities. At the same time, the lessons developed over the past decades by Ernst Gellner, Benedict Anderson, or Eric Hobsbawm, to mention only those three, have clearly demonstrated that identity references are more often than not the mere product of die-hard common beliefs, that most, if not all communities, have to a great extent been imagined, and that the most seemingly rooted traditions may be the deliberate product of an invention. It would be wise to bear such elementary truths in mind. Unfortunately, historians everywhere, and notably in Europe today, accept to fuel nationalistic fantasies by rooting purported identities in a faraway past, by forging new sets of invented traditions, and by giving credence to the notion of what is truly autochthonous. Today, such an attitude is not only a robust obstacle against any writing of the history of Europe, but also these political tensions which historians are now subjected to can thus be summarized. The lessons of Eric Hobsbawm, Terence Ranger, and others must not be forgotten, but at the same time, we must not lend a deaf ear to the demands of illusory identity expressed by voters of populist movements, which are becoming a major concern throughout Europe. For many decades, researchers addressing the issue would essentially mobilize two series of intellectual resources with universalist undertones. The first one, inherited from Marxism, rooted the political shaping and transformations of societies, whether European or not, within the analysis of their socio-economic development. The second, inherited from Kant's critical philosophy, not to go all the way back to Augustinian considerations, and later from the liberal thinkers of the 19th and 20th centuries, paid attention to the logical forms and legal procedures used to define the political regimes of the past, as well as to imagine and promote future ones. In neither case, the emancipation of mankind and the advent of democracy and its consolidation were to be tied to a specific culture or a particular identity. However, these have become two of the major components of what is commonly identified as a truly European form of identity, which partakes of these two intellectual and political traditions, as my predecessor mentioned. A sort of original core that could eventually be threatened by the potential watering down of its initial message. In other words, European identity could eventually be lost by overextending its territorial range and by over-diversifying the components of its purportedly original societies. Yet, one of the characteristics of the European tradition has been that of a constant interplay between local grounding and what I have given the name of imperial expansion, which is precisely what enabled the development of this universalistic point of view, denounced either as guiltily ethnocentric or as blindly technocratic, as we often hear. It should not be forgotten, as sometimes it is, that empires thrived both within the geographically defined territory of Europe and beyond, duly combining a multicultural dimension with the permanent search for spiritual and political utopia. In that respect, for instance, the discovery of the New World as an extension of Europe enabled both the millennium-based theories of the kingdom of heaven to the achievement of a generalized independent republican system of government, which even present-day Europe has yet to fulfill. I mean, there are still monarchies around us. Another one of the issues in this multicultural dimension is also the constant interplay between ethnic groups. Europe, it is often forgotten, has always been a melting pot of sorts. From the days of Neanderthal Homo sapiens genetic encounters to the present. And this is still a process in the making. The question of achieving what at one point was claimed in the case of America, of a genuine cosmic race truly representing the blending of all, or practically all, the components of the human species. And it is something that is currently in the making in Europe. Also, apart from this multi-ethnic tradition, or development of tradition, Europe can also claim a multicultural definition from the days of the Roman Empire, if not belong. One cannot really talk about single cultural unity within the territory. Europe has been the harbor of various religions throughout its history, Christianity being, of course, one of them, but one of them. And in the case of Christianity, one has to admit that at some point it acted more as a divisive than as a unifying phenomenon in terms of the religious wars that we all know about. This multiculturalism, or this evolution of a multicultural tradition, also defines the multiculturalism of those empires that formed within Europe from Holy Roman times. I mean, after all, the Holy Roman Empire, or Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, or the Ottoman Empire, which dominated part of European territory, were multicultural entities with a coexistence of various communities, more or less peaceful according to time, many times contrary to popular belief. And this question of empires within Europe also, I think, dominates the idea of the expansion of Europe beyond. I mean, Europe has this characteristic of having defined imperial domination throughout the world and developed a united form of early globalization from the 16th century onwards. So, if one questions, as I have very briefly tried to do, the question of European identity, then what is the problem with enlargement? It is not really a threat. Or how can this enlargement preserve, through integration, a diversity that is the undergoing reality? What could be the solution? And it seems to me that there is one particular instrument that unites this question of multiculturalism, of diversity, and also, as my illustrious predecessor reminded, the question of the spiritual with the earthly. And that is one instrument called the university. Europe has developed the model of an educational entity, the university, that is now dominating the world. And this is a product of European tradition developed during the Middle Ages. It is true, it's strong religious background. But basically, it is an entity that has promoted curiosity, research, the questioning of any kind of pre-established truths. After all, we in Krakow should remember we're in the illustrious town when a student in the neighboring Jagiellonian University questioned the fact that maybe it was not the sun that circled the earth, but the other way around. This is an important contribution, and if that is not universal, then nothing is. Also, the universities, seems to me, have played a fundamental part in the times when Poland was divided, in providing a unifying set of references, of frameworks. Universities set both, all together in the Russian, the German, or the Austro-Hungarian part of the former Poland, and between them have been able to develop a national goal. The same example could be said about the possibility of the university cooperation model in Europe. After all, the ranking of universities may be done in Shanghai, and Harvard may usually be at the top of the list, but the model itself is truly European and has been an issue for the expansion of the European model throughout the world. So therefore, the answer to my initial question, and I would like to end with this note of hope. We don't have a practical, material solution, but an educational one. The answer to how can European identity resist enlargement and integration is one of educational cooperation, of permanent questioning, of uniting the spiritual and the temporal. After all, in the word university, you do have the word universal. And this universal image is, in my view at least, the best form to preserve European identity in the future. I thank you.